Indeed, if you listen to the news, one thing is certain.
We begin with breaking news here in Germany, where the governing coalition has collapsed and Chancellor Olaf Scholz has called for a confidence vote in mid-January.
Volkswagen has issued a warning that has people wondering whether it has reached the end of the road as an industrial powerhouse.
Germany's economy is going down the drain. And yet, here you are about to listen to an economist on YouTube telling you, don't worry about Germany's economy. It's going to be just fine and may arguably even have a very bright future ahead of it. For 5 reasons, starting with reason number 1, Germany's industry is exceptionally resilient. To see why, just zoom out a bit and you will see that Germany has been Europe's industrial base for well over 100 years. Germany's industry has survived 2 wars. It has survived splitting up the entire country. It survived the stagnation of the early 2000s when Germany was coined the sick man of Europe. And it, yes, will survive this minor downturn as well. Why? Well, besides the fact that its infrastructure and knowledge is firmly established, the German industry stands out by the fact that it is highly diversified. In fact, the Harvard Complexity Lab has consistently ranked Germany in the top 5 most complex economies in the world, just below Japan, but well above the US and even China. This means that if there is a crisis in one industry or one particularly large firm, there are many other areas of German industry that may cushion the blow. Today, this is more relevant than ever, given that the main problem German firms have been dealing with the last couple of years is a massive skills shortage. A skills shortage that sounds pretty bad, but actually let's take a step back and think about that for a second. There are not enough skilled people in Germany to produce what German firms can potentially produce. But you could also say that there are just too many highly competitive, amazing firms in Germany for its workforce. That is a problem that many countries would love to have. It means that news which would be horrible in most countries, like companies wanting to close factories and move them elsewhere, is actually good news for Germany. It is the skills shortage solving itself. The skills shortage is pressuring German wages to go up. This causes some less productive firms like Miele and Volkswagen to move factories elsewhere. And while this is terrible for those people losing jobs that they may have loved, it means that on the scale of the economy, a bunch of skilled workers have just become available to help the thousands of other great German firms that cannot grow without them. Sadly, German society does not yet seem to fully understand this is how the economy is supposed to operate. As the news that Volkswagen may keep factories open in Germany in exchange for a 10% pay cut, it was celebrated as somewhat good news. It is really not. Artificially suppressing wages like that keeps ordinary Germans poorer than they need to be, and it starves smaller German companies of the workers that they so desperately need. Allowing the skills shortage to solve itself may even solve Germany's other big problem, its lack of innovation. Indeed, the German press has been alarmed about how new startups halved between 2003 and 2019, and then again dropped by another 6% since 2019. But then again, is it any wonder that young talented Germans are not starting new companies if the skills shortage in the country is so bad that they have their pick of amazingly well-paid jobs straight out of university? So the fact that some of Germany's most well-known companies are in trouble today, that may actually be good news, as it will help companies and startups struggling with the skills shortage to get ahead. Although with Trump back in the Oval Office, deglobalization is likely to continue. Germany's firms famously profited handsomely from globalization in the past, selling machines and advanced goods to China. So now with both China and the US increasingly hostile to German exports, could it be that Germany's industry is facing a big decline after all? No, not necessarily, because the second reason to be optimistic about Germany is that Germany is well positioned to profit from fragmentation. Yes, that's right, I said fragmentation, not deglobalization. You see, there are hopeful signs that deglobalization will mostly take the shape of decoupling between blocks of countries, but that within these blocks, countries will keep trading quite intensely with each other. Even so, the fact that the rise in globalization is over will surely still be bad news for Germany's companies, right? No. You see, another way to look at this is that German companies had basically already completed globalization, during which they profited from selling their technology to China. However, by doing so, they created their own biggest global competitors. But now, with Trump back in the White House, China's position as factory of the world looks increasingly fragile. Therefore, other countries like Vietnam, Hungary and India have an opportunity to become the next factory of the world. But to do so, they will need the latest German machines. That is, of course, if it wasn't for Germany's terrible government that previously only pissed off Trump, stifled German innovation with too much red tape and foolishly neglected to invest in German infrastructure when it could borrow at 0% interest rate. But here again, Germany will likely be fine because, reason number 3, Germany's democracy is working as it should. That is, if a government fails to solve the problems that the public wants them to solve in a functioning democracy, they should be voted out. Indeed, this is exactly why, while the collapse of the Schulz government may look like a sign of weakness, I see it as a sign of strength. His squabbling government was not able to fix Germany's problems, so its popularity plummeted, which led to more squabbling in the coalition, which then subsequently collapsed. Sure, new elections are messy, and they could go wrong, but one thing is clear, the German public is fed up with Germany's crumbling infrastructure, inefficient government, cost of living crisis and red tape. So there is immense pressure for the next government to actually fix these problems or also fall and then the Germans can try again. That being said, there is also one glaring weakness that Germany's politicians have been too slow to address: Germany's dramatic demographic decline. A problem that could be so bad that analysts like Peter Zeihan have said it is essentially a death sentence for the German economy. Luckily though, I'm here to tell you that Germany will be just fine because Germany's demographic decline is actually quite manageable. Sure, as you can see here, Germany is facing a big decline in its working age population and a corresponding rise in its population of elderly. And as you can see here, Germany's population decline is more drastic than it is in countries like France and the United States. However, it is far less dramatic than it would be in a country like China, where the working age population will inevitably fall below the number of elderly already in 2075. But not only will China's working age population fall faster than that of Germany, the UN is also far more confident in the fact that it will, given that the shaded area, which is the confidence interval, is much smaller for its China projections than for Germany. Why is that the case? Well, the reason is simply that in the past, Germany has seen some pretty big migration waves that have caused its population to increase, even though it had been predicted to decline due to low fertility. This could very well happen again. Sure, there's very little political appetite for that right now, but maybe in 20 years, when labor shortages are much more extreme, it could very well be that Germany again welcomes with open arms immigrants from the east or even the south. And even if that does not come to pass, this chart of Japan's GDP per person in terms of purchasing power shows that an advanced, democratic and well-diversified economy can age gracefully, growing more slowly, sure, but growing nonetheless. And unlike Japan, Germany's government enters its demographic decline phase with exceptionally low debt, meaning that the country has an exceptional amount of financial room to support a rapidly aging population. Of course, now you may say, but even when corrected for this demographic decline, Germany is currently, right now, performing much worse than countries already aging faster, like, for example, even Italy. Which brings us to my final argument, which is that Germany's current problem is only temporary. As you can see here, Germany is unique amongst Western economies in that manufacturing still accounts for a large share of its GDP. This means that the German economy is exceptionally exposed to changes in people's preferences for either goods or services. Preferences that are usually pretty stable, except for, of course, during the pandemic, when the world could not spend that much on services anymore and started ordering way more goods, causing a global manufacturing boom. Not coincidentally, Germany's economy did exceptionally well during the pandemic. But now, with the pandemic well behind us, the global manufacturing sector is in recession. This also affects the United States. But the German economy is just feeling it much more intensely because it is still exceptionally dependent on manufacturing. So of course, where Germany did better than others in the aftermath of the pandemic, it is now doing worse. Luckily, the upside is that when global manufacturing inevitably recovers, Germany will likely do so as well. So, even though the news about Germany seems pretty bad right now, and some of these problems like demographics will likely lead to lower Japan-style growth in the future, I think that Germany will be just fine because, number one, its industry is very well diversified. 2, it is well positioned to actually profit from fragmentation. 3, it will get a new, potentially much more competent government soon. 4, it's relatively well positioned to deal with an aging population. And 5, global manufacturing will recover from the COVID aftermath soon. Although, just to be crystal clear, what I've done here is essentially presented you an opinion. Hopefully one with convincing arguments, but ultimately, any economic opinion about the future should be taken with a large grain of salt, given that it depends for a large part on the decisions of politicians whom are unpredictable. For example, if China invades Taiwan or Trump has a fallout with Germany, many of my optimistic arguments could become far weaker overnight. But of course, there's also many things that can happen that make my arguments, stronger. In any case, therefore, I always recommend comparing opinions from economists like me with those of multiple credible sources, such as, for example, today's sponsor, The Economist. For the skeptical case about Germany's economy, I heartily recommend this article about how Volkswagen's problems could be indicative of a broader trend of deindustrialization in Germany, followed up by this article about how many of its problems today are actually a consequence of Angela Merkel's policies. And finally, to better understand Germany's current political crisis, I recommend this article to read up about the fall of Germany's fractious coalition. Such extensive coverage of economics as well as politics is exactly why I'm excited to share that Money and Macro viewers can now, until December the 3rd, get 50% off an annual subscription to The Economist, which gives you full access to their daily in-depth global reporting for an entire year. What I especially love about The Economist is that they stand for independent journalism for independent thinkers. After all, while they have taken a much more pessimistic stance on Germany, they were still happy to sponsor this video, making the optimistic case instead. Whether you prefer the print edition or their app's digital weekly edition, you'll always get a well-balanced perspective on global affairs, no matter where you are. So, don't miss out on a 50% discount. Click link in description or top comment, or head over to economist.com/moneymacro to claim your exclusive 50% discount today. And by using my link, you support my channel as well. Also, Sie haben es gehört, machen Sie sich keine Sorgen, meine liebe deutsche Freundin.